We're joined today by Keith Coughlan, Executive Chairman of European Metals Limited. Keith, thanks for your time.
Thank you, David.
Developing the Sinovac lithium project in the Czech Republic, one of, if not the largest, hard rock lithium projects in the EU. There's significant macro changes positively occurring in the EU. Can you talk to that and why are they important?
Sure. Well, you're right. There's some very, very strong tailwinds now in the EU. The EU is trying to play catch-up effectively with the rest of the world. Catch-up in terms of securing long-term access to the critical raw materials required to enable the energy transition. It's a global thing. And really the most obvious or the most telling story in this regard was Biden's IRA October, November last year, which really tipped the balance very much in favour of the US developing its critical raw materials and left the EU on the outer. So the EU has been putting together its own version of the IRA called the European Union Critical Raw Materials Act. We've seen a draft of this 2 months ago. We're waiting now expectantly to see the final version be brought into effect in Brussels and then to be embraced by the member states. And it talks of all the things that we've seen in the IRA. For example, significantly more public funding available for projects just like ours, just like Sinovac's. Also a speeding up of the permitting process, which is very important in Europe because on a global basis it's a little slow. Things like the EU wanting to see 10% of all the metals consumed in the energy transition in 2030 to be mined in the EU, 40% of all those metals to be processed in the EU. These are all very, very positive aspirational statements for projects like Sinovac's.
And the legislation itself isn't just an idea, it's actively being debated.
Absolutely. So the EU has fully embraced it, and the debate that's going on now is to bring the member states, across the line, and that's how things happen in Europe, and that's perhaps why it's a little slower than other places in the world. But the requirement for this is absolutely fundamental. The growth in demand for lithium in particular will increase in Europe faster than anywhere else in the world for the foreseeable future, based on the battery factories getting built there and based on the forecast numbers for electric vehicles, and yet there is no production of battery-grade lithium chemicals in the European Union, in Europe, right now whatsoever. So you have to go from zero to a couple of 100,000 tonnes per annum by 2030. It's a very, very big ask.
And the wider support for the industry from within the Czech Republic is growing as well.
Absolutely. So we had the Czech Prime Minister, Peter Fiala, at site approximately 3 weeks ago, which was fantastic. Great to see him there. And he then went on into Germany to Dresden and signed a memorandum of cooperation with the Saxony government, Saxony being the German state immediately across the border from us, talking about the development of lithium projects in that cross-border region, talking about the development of an electromobility industry in that cross-border region, which talks directly to the assistance in the development of Sinovac's.
So we're seeing significant changes in the macro environment in the lithium sector. The supply-demand crossover is really enhancing. What are you seeing and why do you think it will be of benefit to your project?
So the lithium market is a really interesting space. It's pretty opaque, and that's why it's bounced around a little, over the last few years, and why we've seen the price bounce around, although obviously the underlying trend is significantly higher prices. But, we've seen numbers come out in the first quarter of this year, very significant increases in the number of electric vehicles being built year to date, notably by BYD, the Chinese company who are the largest EV producer in the world, and then secondly by Tesla, which are the second largest. And because of those very real numbers that are hitting, the forecasts now are for 14 odd million electric vehicles to be built this year across the world. So that the pressure that puts on the demand for lithium and other metals is significant, and yet the supply side can't move quickly enough to keep up with it. So we have a metal that's in deficit. The deficit is widening. The deficit is there for as long as anyone can predict, which has to have a positive impact on the price, obviously. And then overlying all of that, you have now a concern for energy security, a concern for mineral security, and that's why we're seeing the EU adopt this approach.
Now let's drill down, no pun intended, to the project itself. Test work underway, how important is it and how does it feed into the DFS?
The test work is very important, and that's because Synovitz is not a mainstream spodumene project. You know, it's a mica. And so those who want to be negative about the project will point to this and say, you know, you need to produce this in commercial quantities, which is absolutely true. So all the test work we do is encouraging, but it's with a view to providing that level of certainty to the market that we can do this on a commercial basis. So we're doing more advanced test work here in Perth, pilot work. It's all going very well. As we announced 2 weeks ago, we'll have the final result of that test work in another 3 or 4 weeks. And along with those final results, we'll have somewhere in the vicinity of 20 kilograms of battery-grade chemical, which we can then use for off-taker discussions, for qualification. So it's very important, and it then feeds into the definitive feasibility study. You know, because the DFS is based on this optimised flow sheet. The DFS is on track to be completed 4th quarter of this year, probably early in the 4th quarter, and you need all of those ingredients to feed into the DFS so you have real numbers when that drops.
Talking about the DFS, what do you think the numbers will look like?
Well, it's so hard to predict. You know, our most recent formal numbers are now 18 months old, and they demonstrated an after-tax NPV of $1.9 billion US dollars for the project, an after-tax IRR in excess of 36%, the ability to produce battery-grade lithium hydroxide for about $5,500 US dollars a tonne, all of which are very attractive numbers. You know, but that's 18 months ago, and obviously we've had some inflation in the world since, so CapEx number of $650 million from 18 months ago is likely to go up. We have mitigated that to a degree. You know, with the optimisation of the flow sheet, we've identified some CapEx and OpEx savings in the lithium processing plant in the vicinity of about 15%, so there will be some mitigation. But those numbers were also calculated using a lithium hydroxide price of $17,000 a tonne. Today it's in the mid-40s, so $45,000 a tonne, so 2.5 times more. It has been as high as 70-something thousand in that 18 months. If you were finishing your DFS study today, what number would you plug in? I don't know, but it's not going to be 17,000. So we see that the CapEx we see the NPV and the IRRs being significantly higher than those numbers that were published 18 months ago.
Now, just touching on 2 things. One, both of which have been announced, but there's a 49 million euro grant that has been announced. How does that practically work? How do you draw that down and when do you draw it down?
So we announced that, I think, in January. It's from an EU-based fund called the Just Transition Fund, a fund that was established to enable EU regions previously dependent on the coal economy to transition to green energy, and that's exactly where we are at Synovitz. So there's a pre-approval, if you like, so that money is pre-approved. And we will be drawing down on that in tranches starting a little later this year. So the way it works is the money's sitting there, we make an application to draw down X euros for a specific early stage task in the project, like site preparation, demolition of some of the buildings on the land we've just secured, digging the access at it into the ore body, for example. So we'll be drawing down on that, as I say, later in the year in tranches. The fact that we've received one EU-based grant, I think, is very advantageous to us when we start looking about other potential grants and other potential grants that might become available due to the Critical Raw Materials Act. We're already pre-approved, we're already designated a strategic project, we're already in the system, if you like.
Last question. Recently announced a significant land acquisition close to the project. Why? Why not option it? Why buy it? And what does buying it tell the market? Well,
we've bought a portion of it and we've optioned the rest of it, if you like. And that was just the way that the commercial negotiations panned out. And we had, there are 4 different owners to the land that we've now secured. So we the timing of those acquisitions was important. Obviously, we wanted to be able to tie them all together at the same time for obvious reasons. So it's important to have access to that land now, because now DRA, our engineering consultant, can do all the layout work as part of the definitive feasibility study, and needing the actual land secured is important in doing that. It's also important because the majority of that land is already zoned as we need it. We have applied for some rezoning in areas surrounding it, but it's nice and close to the project site, which is important for a number of reasons: costs, but also ESG credentials and access to the land. It has a rail spur running into it already. It's happily a very attractive piece of land for us. We've been looking at it for well over a year. A lot of work on it over a year ago now to ensure that it was the right piece of land for us from a geotechnical point of view and from a land usage point of view, and very happy to now have secured it.
What does it tell the market?
It tells the market the project's going to get built, the project's going ahead. You know, it's not just us securing this land, it's our Czech partner, Czech, you know, the largest company in the Czech Republic, market capitalisation of about 25 billion euros, 70% owned by the Czech government. You know, Czech wouldn't be helping us secure this project now, this land now, if they didn't believe the project was going ahead.
A world-class project in the exact right jurisdiction, legislation coming to the company and the project, great support in the EU, great support directly in the Czech Republic. Exciting times ahead, lots of milestones to look for over the next 6 months. Keith, thanks for your time.
Thank you, David.